Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and my name is Craig Smith, and welcome to the Coffee with Craig show today. I'm here with Randy Mott, who's head of Republicans in Poland. We're here to talk about the interim elections that are going to happen in the U.S. on November 6th, and for the Democrats, November 7th, but so November 5th, 6th. So, Randy, thank you for joining the Coffee with Craig show this morning.
Thank you for having me.
And tell us a little bit about your predictions and why you think things are going to happen the way they're going to happen in the U.S.
Okay, well, I've been in Poland a long time. Before that, I was 26 years in Washington, D.C. and active in politics there as well. My predictions are that the Republican Party will pick up 5, maybe even 6 seats in the U.S. Senate, and we'll lose 12 to 15 seats in the House, which is still enough to retain a majority. So I think they'll retain control of both houses of Congress. Governorships, they have a lot more governors running than the Democrats do, and I think they may drop a couple of governorships. But you've got to remember the Republican base numbers we're starting with going into this election is the highest number of Republicans elected to office in the United States since 1920. Mm-hmm. So an off year would involve necessarily almost them coming down a little bit from those numbers, but not in the Senate at all. The Senate will gain seats, and that will be extremely important.
So what do you think's causing this, or why do you think we're hearing different viewpoints? And as you hit the election numbers exactly right on for the Trump election, what should people be expecting now?
Well, the polling, there's a fundamental problem with the polling data for a lot of the organizations, and they're not quite sure what kind of turnout models to use or who is a likely voter. They're also frequently under contract from large liberal media organizations, mm-hmm. and if you get inside the polls that show there will be a blue wave electing a lot of Democrats, you can see they quite frequently oversample the Democratic voters. Mm-hmm. Sometimes even as much as +7. So their sample size has 7% more Democrats than Republicans.
Okay.
In the last election, there was roughly 1% more Democratic voters than Republican voters. And the other problem you have in the polling data, national polling data, is that California and New York will be overwhelmingly Democrat with a lot of people. But there's only a certain number of people that can be elected in California and New York. The basic problem the Democrats have is the map of the United States is almost all red. There are large urban areas that are blue, mm-hmm. And generally that's entirely what their base is. You have some other factors coming up. One is Trump did exactly what he said he was going to do on most issues, and that to most people, these are majority policies that are supported by an overwhelming number of the people. Better economy, better jobs, getting rid of the ISIS caliphate, putting more strict constructionist on the court, so the court doesn't make law, it only mm-hmm. interprets the Constitution. The support on the immigration policy is generally much broader than the media would let on. Trump has no new immigration laws. He's just enforcing the laws that are there, and overwhelming majority of Americans want to enforce the immigration laws. So what happened to close the gap is a couple of things. One is you get closer to the election, more and more of the polls are likely voter polls, not just registered voter polls. Mm-hmm. And registrations don't mean that much, but the likely voter model, if it's a good one, means everything.
Sure.
Rasmussen, who had the best data on the 2016 election that had pegged it very well, has the national so-called generic ballot between Republicans and Democrats is now a toss-up. Real Clear Politics has just the average of all the polls, including the ones that I say are not very accurate, still has basically a toss-up right now with about an equal number of Republican and Democratic House seats as likely or for sure, and with only 29 toss-ups, they say right now. But what's happening with their data is the same thing that happened with the Senate data. It's all shifting dramatically. There's a red line for Republicans, and each case is going way up. Mm-hmm. This started with the Kavanaugh confirmation hearings, where the Democrats pretty much made idiots out of themselves. Cory Booker's Spartacus moment, mm-hmm. Kamala Harris implying she had some real damaging specific information, which was apparently all make-believe. And the demonstrators in the middle of the hearing room screaming and shouting, and the demonstrators pounding on the doors of the Supreme Court. Something that happens in third world countries and it shouldn't happen in the U.S. Then the economic news continues to be great, and the growth in jobs we're seeing is in manufacturing and good jobs. Mm-hmm. The Obama job growth was enormously done in the part-time job sector, and there were a lot of people who wanted full-time jobs who could only get part-time. So the employment situation completely turned around.
So real full-time jobs in manufacturing, in finance.
We now have more job openings in the United States than we have unemployed people. So it's just a question of training and matching things more. But the definition of full employment is about 3% unemployment, which is called frictional unemployment, which is the normal level when people are just moving jobs or in between jobs, or taking a pregnancy leave of absence, or have a health leave of absence for some reason. Mm-hmm. So frictional unemployment is about 3%. So we're pretty much close to full employment in the United States right now. And most people want good jobs on the top of the list, and we see among blacks and Hispanic populations some of the highest employment levels ever recorded in those groups. Mm-hmm. Unemployment is extremely low by historical terms for those groups. So our Republican philosophy is most people want the same thing. They want a good job. They want to own a home. They want a better future for their children. They want safe streets. And these things Trump is delivering on, despite a lot of people being uncomfortable with his personality, his sometimes abrasive style. But as we get closer to the election, people are saying, I don't care for much about how he acts. I'm not wild about that. But the things that he's delivering are things we all want. And I think that's the...
Sure, safe houses, safe streets, safe borders, jobs. Sounds like a good place to live.
We've been seeing he had 29% of the Hispanic vote in 2016, and now some polls have him as high as 40% with Hispanics. New polls have him between, frequently you'll see 20 or 30% black support for the president. So, and this is all relevant because this election is being nationalized really by both sides, with the Democrats trying to make it an anti-Trump election. Mm-hmm. Their platform sometimes is referred to humorously as, we're against anything Trump is for, we're just anti-Trump. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's for sure. We've seen that the last 2 years. Yep.
And there's a basic problem with that, which was, we say in politics, you can't beat something with nothing. And in many, many cases, there's nothing but some old cliches. And people are looking at the cliches from the left versus what's happened in 2 years with the Republican administration, and saying, things are really much, much better. Mm-hmm. And trend lines are all good. and we will put aside our displeasure with sometimes the way the president acts, which is distinctly non-traditional, to say the least. But I think that's the underlying matrix of what's happening. The critical thing is if we have 54 to 56 Republican senators, this means confirmations will just roll through. And part of the biggest problem has been the Democrats tying up confirmations for the executive branch, which was the slowest pace of getting approvals in recent history. And their anti-Trump agenda included, trying to fight to keep their own people in power in the agencies, and that undermined a lot of the government's program. We saw it most graphically with the Russian collusion scam and the deliberate effort by people in the intelligence and law enforcement area that were holdovers from the Obama administration, trying to make up a bogus story about the Russians working with Trump. But it occurs all over the place in all the agencies. So when you have 54 or 56 senators, there's going to be a chance to really run through a lot more confirmations and get the executive branch on the same page as the White House. And that'll be a huge, huge change.
Well, even here, right now we're in Warsaw, really at the top of Warsaw, in the Intercontinental Hotel on the 41st floor. But even in Warsaw, we just got the ambassador after almost 2 years of kind of waiting. So, and nothing really happening. Now we have our new ambassador, who seems to be very active and actually out meeting the people and doing things in this country.
Yeah, and that's true across the board. So we have the other thing that's happening is we had this never Trump group of Republicans and the Republican Washington establishment, which I suppose I was part of for a while, was very resistant to the Trump administration and did not want to serve or cooperate with him. And so he had brought in the White House itself a lot of complete newbies, and a lot of missteps were made early on. Things were done in a little sloppy fashion, like the immigration executive order, and the way it was done. Ultimately, the core substance of it was approved unanimously by the United States Supreme Court. There was nothing the president did that had any legal problems. How he did it created some legal issues in the interim, and that was because in my opinion, there was nobody at the Justice Department who was cooperating with him, because in normal times, the Justice Department would have seen the White House draft and said, well, we got a little problem here, a little procedure here, you need to change these things to make it fly. And the Justice Department was really, at that point, anti-Trump and trying to undermine him.
Yeah, they just threw it out.
So those things will change, I think, after the election, and we're going to start seeing a more unified federal government, which is why the Senate is so important. We also will not be in a situation where we need somebody who's more libertarian like Rand Paul, or Republicans that are more in the middle like Susan Collins or Murkowski from Alaska. If you don't need those 3 votes, they can do what they want to do or need to do for their constituents, or what they feel is important for their conscience, and you can still have a Republican majority. So that'll be the biggest change. In the House, it's simple majority rule. There's no difference if the House majority is by 2 votes or 23. It still controls the Speaker, it still controls the committee chairs. Legislation is still directed by the majority party, even if it's a majority of 1. So I don't see that being much change on this. From the standpoint of the Democrats, it will probably be worse, because what's happening is the party is being remade in the populist conservative coalition that Trump put together. So more and more of the officials elected are going to be more hardline conservative / populist, and less likely to want to compromise with the left. On the same token, the Democratic Party is becoming as far left as it ever was in the United States, even openly talking about socialism as an option. So I think there'll be gridlock will continue. People who want to have people work in the middle and work out a nice compromise on everything will be a little disappointed. I see another few years of really pretty bitter fights.
Mm-hmm. Well, Randy Mott, head of Republicans in Poland, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks.
And whether you're Republican or Democrat, the most important thing is on the 6th to go out and actually vote. So we hope, and we'll see after the elections what happened, and we hope this will bring the government and people together to make some great decisions over the next 2 years or even 6 years after that. So thank you very much, and
thanks for having me.
Good to have you at Coffee with Craig.